webinar in the, welcome to the second webinar in the 2014 webinar series. Today's webinar is 5 sizzling ways to spice up your panel discussions. And thanks for those of you who were able to join us today as opposed to last Thursday. Technology being what it is, we're here today. So glad you were able to join us. Very excited to have you because we've got some new technology. We have been using kind of a teleseminar platform, and today we're using a new platform called Webinar Jam, and it is a base for Google Hangouts. So the neat thing about this platform is that we've got a chat box. So over on the right-hand side, you'll be able to add whatever questions or comments, and those go directly to me. They don't go to everyone in the planet. And the other neat thing is that we're going to be able to do some polls, so that's pretty exciting. And the other piece is you get to see me live. How about that? So, you know, we're still working through the technology and hope that this works. So thanks for hanging in there. And today's topic is we are talking about panels. You know, we do have a PowerPoint presentation for you to watch, as well as you can download the slides or look at the handout. And we are talking about the 5 sizzling ways to spice up your panel discussions. And so here's what happens, is that people read the program description and they go, oh, wow, it's a panel. Like, people don't go, wow, isn't that amazing? There's a panel discussion, because about 95% of all conferences have some sort of panel discussion. So, you know, people are expecting them, but here's the key, is that they have such low expectations. They really aren't expecting a lot. In a survey that I conducted with 539 executives, meeting professionals, 63% said that panels were merely okay or even worse. So they're not really walking into your session expecting like amazing things to happen. So the good news is, you know, you don't have to do much to really excite them. And you can really do a lot that will make your panel discussions even more amazing. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. If you take away just doing one thing that really makes people get impressed or surprised or wowed, or you know, that they're able to walk away with one tangible skill or piece of information that they got from that panel, rather than it being the traditional ho-hum boring that they didn't get anything from, that's going to be worth our time today. So as people walk in, they generally are faced with that really long table, that long draped table, and there are placards, name tents, and there are microphones, and that just signals to everyone, this is going to be a traditional, boring, ho-hum panel. And so if you want to take it from boring to bravo, I like that, boring to bravo, the first thing that I would recommend that you do to spice up your panel is to ditch the table. Get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Here's a picture of my buddy and colleague Joe Calloway, who I think is an amazing panel moderator, because he really creates discussion on the stage. And if you notice, there is no table there. There's nothing that's a barrier between the panelists and the audience. And in fact, Joe is not even speaking behind a lectern. There is no barrier between the moderator and the audience. So, you know, that's really, really cool. So, you know, get rid of the table, and then people will walk in and they'll go, oh, wow, this isn't a traditional format. Now, if you notice, these panelists are sitting on bar stools. I kind of like bar stools, and in fact, I would recommend that you actually put people on pretty uncomfortable chairs. Again, this is another situation. This is Glenn Thayer, who I think kind of looks like Anderson Cooper. We call him the Anderson Cooper of the meetings industry. And he's moderating a panel discussion with some other luminaries in the meetings industry. And if you notice that they are sitting on bar stools too. Now, if you notice, bar stools aren't exactly the most comfortable chairs. And if you do put people on bar stools, please let them know, especially women, so that they're not wearing some kind of skirt or something that would be completely unattractive on a bar stool. But you really don't want panelists to sink into the chair and be cozy and comfortable. I mean, if you look at talk show formats, they kind of look like they're comfortable chairs, but if you notice, everybody kind of sits on the front half of the chair because they really aren't comfortable their chairs. They look good for the TV audience, but they're really not very comfortable for the panelists. So sometimes when you're working with hotels, they'll give you the nice comfy chairs from the lounge. You don't want those. You want something that keeps people on their toes, kind of keeps them a little edgy, a little off balance, so that you can kind of get that conversation. In fact, I was talking with Warren Evans, and he dredged up this photograph. I think Warren was telling me that this was the early 2000s. You can see Warren is on the right-hand side, and he's in a a typical kind of moderating chair. But the executive team, the three folks on the left-hand side, they're sitting rather closely together on a couch. And that was very deliberate. It's not the most comfortable couch. And so can you imagine what people are thinking as they walk into this quote-unquote panel discussion and they see one chair and then a couch? And actually, this couch is not that great of a looking couch. And Warren said that it was very deliberate. It was to enforce to the audience visually that this team, this executive team, was working together and that their conversations were very comfortable with each other, even in that close proximity. You know how people have their personal space and you don't want to get too close to people? So, think about how you're going to set the stage that says to people, wow, this is not going to be your traditional panel discussion. That's pretty cool. Now, the other thing that you can do is that you can look at how you want your audience to sit. So your audience is probably going to be sitting in theater or classroom style seating. They're basically in rows. That's pretty traditional. That's pretty ho-hum. So you might want to think about doing something different, and maybe put people in round tables of rounds, so that they can talk with each other, not just not just be passive participants, but that you could actually have the group talk to each other. And we're going to be talking more a little bit later about how to get the audience involved. So you might want to think about, how are you going to sit the audience that they would go, wow, this is going to be different. This isn't going to be ho-hum. So the first step is really about to spice it up, is that you create visual variety. You ditch the table and do something that really signals to the audience as they're walking in, this is not the traditional ho-hum. You can put some posters on the wall. You can have some music, playing. Make sure that it's upbeat music. I was working an event just a couple of months ago, and the conference promoter is a big, or the AV guy was a jazz fan. So he had this bluesy, mellow jazz stuff, and you were just like, I'm going to be put to sleep if I listen to that anymore. So you want to make sure that you've got something upbeat. You can have a looping slideshow. I put together a looping slideshow of team quotes. It's called Team Quotables. You can download it off of SlideShare, and it just is a looping PowerPoint of quotes. So you can have something like that. You just make sure that there's no clutter on the stage. If you put some greenery up, that's kind of nice. But the whole backdrop should be an interesting color. Make sure that all the clutter is moved away, so that ultimately when people walk in, they go, oh my gosh, this is going to be good. That's really what you want. So that is our first step. And I am trying to get back off the PowerPoint so that it's not letting me do that now. Why is that? There we go, because I have to find the right button. Technology, isn't it a great thing? So I thought at each step, when we've got 5 steps, 5 methods, that I would take a look at what your thoughts, questions, or comments are. So I see one that's coming in from Miriam, and Miriam says, theater style, is there anything that you can do that doesn't have tables? Like if you want to put people in rounds, you know, it seems like theater style is the only option. So Miriam, yes, there are things that you can do. In fact, I wrote a blog article on this. It's called audience-centered seating. So you can do very creative ways of taking that theater style and then wrapping it around the stage. And I will, in the replay, the email that you're going to get about the replay link to this, I will put in audience-centered seating guidelines for you, because it's a really neat way of making sure that the audience is creatively positioned, that the feng shui, the energy of the group stays in the group, and all that kind of stuff. And that, you know, sometimes when you're sitting on one of the sides, you're having to twist and turn, and it's just not that comfortable for the audience. So I will be happy to pass that along. So thanks, Miriam. Let's see, do we have any other stickies? I don't see anything, so we are going to move on to the next one. So the first step, the first way of spicing up your presentation or your panel discussions was to create some visual variety. First and foremost, ditch the table. The second one is about creating a spicy title. Now, I don't know if you use this sriracha stuff. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but it permeates everything in your dish. And when you're creating a spicy title, you're looking for a title that can carry out its theme throughout your panel discussion. So for example, this title is about spicing up your panel discussion. So I'm using spice as a theme, as a metaphor. So you might want to think about how can you use that to kind of bind your ingredients together, how to bring them together. Now, I must do a disclaimer here. I am the world's worst titleist when it comes to panel discussion titles or speech titles or book titles or anything. It's just good. I'm just not very good at it. And so I would highly recommend that you tap into your friends. Or this is my mastermind group. So these are a group of ladies that we meet once a quarter with, and they're just great to bounce ideas off of. And I just want to point out Pamela Jett, who's over on your right-hand side, kind of sticking her head over on Carol's shoulder. Pamela runs a company called Words Matter, and she is brilliant when it comes to putting words together, words to use and words to lose. I love the way that she thinks. And so using your friends to help give you some different ideas about how to title your panel discussion is really helpful. Sam Horn is another great friend. She actually wrote a book on how to write panel discussions. So, and I can't even remember, but it starts with POP. It's a really long title, but it's Sam Horn, and I would highly recommend Sam as well. Another place to get inspiration is magazine headlines. I was just reading Inc. magazine on the way on the plane the other day, and you know, it's amazing what kind of ideas that you can get from any of the magazines. And I could have put Cosmopolitan up here, but I don't read Cosmopolitan. So I read Inc. magazine, I read Fortune magazine, I read the Wall Street Journal, you know, newspaper headlines. And if you notice, a lot of them are how-to kind of headlines. People want to know the inside story, and really the reason why you're doing a panel discussion is to give people the inside story, the inside scoop, stuff that they can't just read in a magazine, stuff that happens inherently that bubbles up from the discussion, the interaction, and the interplay between the panelists. So you might want to get some ideas from some magazine headlines. The other place is that I love doing riffs off of talk shows. You know, so you pick a talk show that really resonates with you or might resonate with the people in the audience, and you do a, not a parody, but a mock, a riff of that talk show. So, for example, when I was president of the National Speakers Association, we had Scott McCain, who is a professional speaker, do a riff off the Bill Maher talk show called Real Time with Bill Maher. What we did with Scott is we did Real Time with Scott McCain. And what was really cool is that we kind of did a riff off of what Bill Maher does. And so, there are different ways that you can do that. I mean, you don't have to do Bill Maher. You could do Ellen DeGeneres. Brian Walter was telling me that he did a panel discussion based on Ellen, but he called it Sellin because it was for a bunch of sales marketing people. You get it? Ellen, Sellin? Yeah, okay. So you have to get up pretty early in the day to catch up with that kind of stuff. But it really made it interesting. And what they did is they thought about all of the elements that go into Ellen and tried to bring that into that format. So you really want to have it visually stimulating when people walk into the room. They go, oh my gosh, this is different. And in the promotional material and in the title, you want to have something that people go, wow, that's really different. That's intriguing. I want to go to this panel discussion because I think it's going to be different. So you want to ditch the table and create a spicy title. I am now going to look at to see if there are any questions out there. So take a look at your comments. Any questions? I have a question from Kathy. And Kathy says, does it have to have panel in the discussion, in the title? So Kathy, I don't think you need to have panel in the title, like it has to be panel discussion, because that's kind of boring. But if it's a panel, like you have a bunch of people in a talk show format, at some point you might want to say in the description, the words, that this is a panel for, panel discussion. That's just me. I don't think it's a big deal because in your description, you're going to say we're going to hear from 4, amazing people, whether you call them people or panelists, people will know. So don't try to obfuscate it. How's that as a word? Don't try to hide it. But I don't think you really need to put panel in the title or in the description unless it's not clear that this is really, you're going to be hearing from the experts in the field or practitioners in the field or people that you want to hear from. So thanks, Kathy. I think that was a great question. So let's move on to the step number 3. Step number 3, and that is, once you have your title, I think you should vary the format. Make sure that it's got enough spice going on along the way, that it's not just the same old, same old, same old. So, we talked about mimicking the talk show format, and there's a very easy way to do that. You pick a talk show that resonates with your audience. Like if you know that many of the people in the audience watch the David Letterman talk show, which no longer exists, by the way, but it's a great talk show, ran for many, many years. So you basically want to think through, okay, what are the different things that happens during that talk show? So, for example, David Letterman does a monologue. He might do a top 10 list. He has some pretty unusual guests. He does stupid pet tricks, stupid human tricks. He does viewer mail, supermarket finds, dumb ads, small town news. He has a segment called Ask Mr. Melman. He does his record collection. He has the guy come in. And all of these, by the way, I have not been obsessed about David Letterman, just as another disclaimer. I got these off of Wikipedia. And then you can use these as a springboard to say, oh, okay, so how are we going to jazz this up? How are we going to jazz this up? Because most people are going to consider that it's the typical format. Here's the typical format. There's the Q&A style, where there's a beginning thing, there's some moderator curated discussion comments, and then there's a Q&A, and then you wrap it up. Or you can have an initial remark style where there's a welcome, and then there's some presentation stuff, and then there's moderator curated questions, and then there's some Q&A with the audience, and then it's a wrap up. Or you can have my least favorite, which is a welcome, and then everybody presents for a very long time, which leaves very little time for audience Q&A, and then a wrap up. And my problem with that one is that if you're going to do that kind of style, why don't you just bring people up, give them a 20-minute slot to present and do Q&A? I just don't get this one. But it is a pretty typical format. In fact, let's do a poll. Which format do you typically see at a panel? Let's see. I'm going to add that poll. Let's see. Can you see that poll? Let's see. Start poll. There you go. So if you're there, if you want to add the make a remark to the poll, that would be great. Okay, and then I am going to, looks like all of you are adding, so I'm going to end the poll, and let's see. I can't see the results. Well, there you go. Well, another opportunity. Oh, there we go. I just found it. Which format do you typically see? So I see, I have to put my glasses on here. So most of you see the 50% presentation style and 50% initial remark style. Isn't that interesting? Well, very good. Well, thanks for sharing that one. I appreciate that. I had to figure out which segment to go and put my glasses on. So, you know, here's what's really sad, though, is that we have. Hang on a second. I am trying to move this slide forward. Okay, there we go. Hello, I am going to move the slide forward now. How about that? There we go. Okay, so Sally Hogshead, who is a dear friend of mine and colleague, she talks about the attention span of the audience being about the attention span of a goldfish of about 9 seconds. And so we've got to be capturing our attention, not every 9 seconds, but you've got to be keeping it moving and making it fascinating. And Sally really is the expert when it comes to what makes things fascinating and what keeps people's attention. And I highly recommend that if you are a panelist or a moderator, that you take a look at what is it that your, and for lack of a better term for me, it's your je ne sais quoi, what is it about you that makes you interesting, that makes you fascinating. And Sally has done extensive research on this, and she just came out with a new book called How the World Sees You. It's being published the 1st of July, so if you order it, you get free bonuses up until about June 24th, I think, is what she's got. So I would highly recommend that you check that out, because what happens is that about every 6 minutes, I'm not going to say 9 seconds, but about every 6 minutes, and we've been programmed this way from TV commercials, is that we need to spice it up. We need to add something. You know, this is why David Letterman adds in, you know, his stupid pet tricks, and why he has the supermarket finds, and he has these short little bursts of, hey, isn't this kind of interesting? You know, it just kind of sets you into, wow, oh, okay. So you want to think through, as you're putting together your format, what you're going to do to spice it up. That it does not have to be the traditional same-o, same-o. You need to start strong. That sends the signal, hey, this is going to be interesting, this is going to be interactive, it's going to be fun, it's going to be informative, whatever your message is that you're trying to send. So what I like to do a lot of times right now is show a video clip that's really pertinent, that's less than a minute. It just is, it's different because people still aren't using a whole lot of video in conferences and meeting rooms. Take a poll of the group. Find out who's in the room. Let other people know who's in the room. Now, you can do a poll just as a raise of hands. You can do a poll using index cards, or have them wave flags. We'll be talking a little bit about that later. Or you can use audience response systems. My favorite is, if you know if everybody's got a cell phone, it's use something called Slido, S-L-I-D-O. So love that. You might want to put people in triads first and say, so what is the one question that you really want answered? What's the one question that you want answered today? Have them put them in triads, and then let them ask their questions. Don't even go into a presentation. Just make it a very fluid Q&A that's all based on what the audience wants. You could ask for questions using 3x5 cards at the beginning, and then take them up, and then after you get through your welcoming things, maybe somebody's sifting through it and saying what are some of the common questions. You could do a social media hashtag, like a Twitter hashtag, and then get questions from there. And of course, my favorite, Slido, is a way to find out what's on people's minds. So you need to introduce Slido, or some people use Poll Everywhere. You know, whatever your audience response system is, at the beginning you need to tell them that you're using it and how you're going to be collecting information. So start strong. And then at key point, infuse something that's kind of interesting. And my friend, Brian Walter, who's just an amazing creative guy, he runs a company called Extreme Meetings. And so we were kind of coming up with some ideas, and he goes, you know, Kristin, every once in a while, just ask them a simple yes, no, or maybe question. Ask the panelists. That's all they're able to answer. Yes, no, or maybe. It just kind of ratchets it into kind of a different mindset. So, but you need to have those yes, no, maybe questions in your back pocket, much like if you remember behind the actor's studio with James Lipton. At the end, he always asks the same question. My favorite question that he asks is, what's your favorite curse word? I thought that's an interesting question. It's like, huh. But you wouldn't want to ask that of your panelists, but, or maybe you would, I mean, I don't know. But you want to have some of those yes, no, maybe one-line answers. So another way is just you're only able to do a one-sentence response. A one-sentence response, or a lightning round, which means you get 20 seconds to respond. Or there's the 20-second rant, which is if you have one thing that you want to rant on, you have 20 seconds to, this is your bully pulpit. Another one is to nudge your neighbor. You know, ask the audience to take a look at the neighbor after you talked about a certain topic, and ask the neighbor, so what do you think about what we just talked about? I got that idea from Jeff Hurt. You know, just nudge your neighbor. I call it nudge your neighbor. I don't think he calls it nudge your neighbor, but I call it a nudge your neighbor. You can take a poll. You know, how many of you believe that this is the way that we need to go, or is there another way? I mean, take a poll. Show of hands. You know, make people clap, stomp their feet, stand up, sit down, shake. You know, fight. And of course, at any key point, you can take a question. So think about the format. In fact, I was just reading a blog posting of a guy who's the VP of marketing for DC Comics, and he knew that they were coming out with some pretty sensational news, that they were going to reintroduce a character, and they knew that one of the people in the audience just loved this character, and at Comic-Con she always dresses up in that character, and so he asked her if at a certain point, when a certain slide went up, that she demanded to ask a question of the panelists. And she goes, ooh, I can't do that. And he goes, no, I really want you to do that. So when she did that, they announced that this character was coming back to life. And it was just fabulous that the audience was able to see this woman who was so enamored of this character was able to be the first one to know about it and to really prompt it. It was just, I just thought that that was a really cool thing, to think about how are you going to inject that life, that interest, that spice, that variety into the panel discussion. So those are some things to think about. So we've got ditch the table, we've got create a spicy title, and we've got vary the format. And you know, I thought maybe now would be a good time to give out one of my books on powerful panels, which is how it's a step-by-step guide to moderating a lively and informative panel discussion. And I am sitting here with the roster, and the roster, I'm putting my hand, and it's falling on Tim Gank. I don't know if I said that right. And it looks like you're with Travelers. Looks like you're with Travelers. So. And I also would like to point out, so congratulations, Tim. I'll be sending you a copy of that. And it also just wanted to point out that we got 7 free short training videos on how to moderate a panel discussion. So you can find that out at Powerful Panels. So let me take a look at the questions here. let's take a look at the questions at the chat screen. Do we have any chats here? Okay, I have Josh. Josh, who asks, what's the best panel format? You know, Josh, that's a great question because there is no perfect panel format. You know, I think the perfect panel format is one that resonates with the audience, it resonates with the topic, and it resonates with you and your style. So think of it like 3 Venn diagrams, and the perfect panel for that topic at that time with that audience, with you moderating it or being a panelist, is right at the intersection of that Venn diagram. I hope that that's helpful. So thanks for asking about that one. Appreciate that. So we are now going to move into number 4. Step number 4, which, let's see, is about engaging the audience. And, you know, I got a question for you, is what gets you engaged in a panel discussion? I mean, what gets you engaged? And you can write those in the chat box if you have any ideas about what gets you engaged. You know, there's a lot of different ways to engage, and I've already mentioned some of them. And a lot of it is about what you think about and how you set it up. It just doesn't happen instantaneously. So how are you going to get questions and answers from the group? I mean, you can get things on social media even ahead of time now. You can get things on 3x5 cards. You can use Poll Everywhere or Slido. You know, think about the room setup. Mingling, making sure that your panelists and you mingle with the crowd before you take the stage. It's amazing how that one little thing it just kind of creates that connection between you and the audience. Take a poll, not only at the beginning, but at those key points. About every 6 minutes, you want to pepper it with something. Have the group do small group discussions. I had nudge your neighbor. You can use your tables if you're in a table round. At the beginning, you can ask them, so what are the key questions that you want periodically? So what do you think about that specific item that we've been discussing? Or at the end, how are you going to implement? What are you going to do with this information? So make sure that your Q&A is interesting. Now, somebody was asking me, should you seed the audience with Q&A, with some questions? You know, I think if you've done your homework and you've gotten some questions from the audience ahead of time, you don't really need to. But if you're nervous and you're a brand new panel moderator, I would say absolutely. There is nothing wrong with taking a question that you think is appropriate and letting people, you know, in the audience kind of prompt the Q&A to get started. I was at a fairly high-level celebrity panel discussion, and of course they opened it up to questions after we had all been sitting there for 40 minutes. And you know, who's got a question? And so it's just kind of awkward, that first question, but once that first question is done, then other questions start popping up. So I would not feel bad at all about having some questions. And then another neat thing is to ask the audience to summarize, rather than you as the moderator, is to have the audience summarize. So what are your takeaways? What do you think about this? So those are some ways to engage the audience. Just make sure that you're not having them sit there being fed for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, and then you save 2 minutes for Q&A and then let them go. That's just a travesty. You want to make sure that they stay involved from the beginning, from the get-go. The last tip is about stimulating discussion, making it hot and spicy. And, you know, I think the kiss of death is a death by PowerPoint, just having people talk on PowerPoint. If I'm moderating a panel, generally I do not like any presentation. Maybe there might be 2 minutes of a presentation, and I might let them have 1 or 2 slides. But the whole point of this is so that we have a juicy debate, we have a juicy discussion. So I am not looking for the hot potato where I ask the same question of all the panelists. So by the time you get to the 5th panelist, he's like saying, well, I agree with what everybody else said, and then feels compelled to reiterate it. It's like, duh, I don't need to hear it. So one of the ground rules that I always ask is that we are repetitive, or that we're not repetitive, we're additive. We're additive, not repetitive, so that we don't get into that hot potato syndrome. The other thing is that you see that happens a lot of times with panelists who have nothing in common, and I see this happen more often than not, is that you'll see the ping pong effect. So I, as the moderator, will ask one panelist number one their opinion. We have a lovely little chit chat, and then I ask a different question of panelist number two, and we have a lovely little chit chat, and then I ask a different question of panelist number three, and we have a lovely little chit chat, and there isn't any chit chat among the panelists. In fact, I was watching a panel recently where one of the panelists was, he's a pretty seasoned panelist and a pretty seasoned moderator. He was actually trying to crawl over the moderator, because the moderator was sitting in between him and the other panelists. And he was actually crawling over, not literally, but metaphorically crawling over the moderator to actually engage the other panelists, because he was so frustrated. So you're not looking for those kinds of traditional things that happen. What you're trying to do is keep it lively, keep it interesting. And that means that as a moderator, you need to curate your questions. You need to ask for questions. As a panelist, you need to know what your key messages are and be able to say things succinctly and concisely and make it memorable. Use different formats of Twitter or Slido or Poll Everywhere to get input from the audience. One of the things that I love to do is to create an empty seat. And so that empty seat is, you put an empty seat at the panelist, and you just say at the beginning, the ground rules are, any of you can be a panelist. Not for the entire time, but if you have something that you want to contribute as an expert or a part of the panelist, you come up, you simply sit at that seat. And if somebody else, all they do is they come up and they put their hand on your shoulder, and then you need to finish your comment if you're in the middle of a comment and exit, and that next person takes the seat. So it's actually kind of a neat way of bringing the audience into the discussion. My caveat with that is that you need to have a very strong moderator who can basically kick somebody out of the seat if they don't belong there. Having a moderator walk into the audience and make sure, kind of do the Oprah thing, making sure that the audience is staying connected. So all of this, in order to stimulate the discussion among the panelists as well as with the audience, it all boils down to having a skilled moderator. It just does. I mean, you can have brilliant panelists, but if you don't have a very good skilled moderator, the panelists are still not going to come across really well. However, if you have a skilled moderator and not so great panelists, that moderator can make panelists look freaking brilliant. And that's a technical term, freaking brilliant. So, in order to keep it lively, in order to have a really sizzling format, to engage the audience with a striking title and knowing how to set the stage, the moderator can help set that tone very, very nicely. So, boy, we've been through an awful lot here. So the ways that you spice it up is that you're very intentional. I think panels are a lazy format, and I've seen this happen. The organizer calls a moderator and panelists because they need some visibility. They have good name recognition, but they might not have the skills, and they might not have the message that needs to be put into place. So if you want to spice up your panel presentations, make sure that you have the right people on the stage to begin with. Your audience is going to be there. And so those people, the moderator and the panelists, they need to serve the audience versus their own agenda. So making sure that you've got great content, and that's a different webinar. But this one is really about how do you make sure that it's interesting and spicy and lively and engaging so that people will want to stay at your panel discussion. So I hope you got some great ideas. because ultimately you want them to walk away being impressed or surprised or go, wow, that was a great panel discussion. Because, you know, panel discussions are a great format. They simply are, and they're not going away. So let's all pinky promise that we're going to make panels much better. There's a couple of ways that we can make those panels powerful. We've got a LinkedIn group that's very dynamic. We've got some free videos, training videos. We've got a book, and as well as a membership site. So the membership site has all kinds of special surprises and checklists and videos and interviews with other seasoned panel moderators. So thanks for joining us. Our next webinar is the Team Trifecta, 3 Keys to a Highly Successful Team. That's going to be held on September 11th. That's quite a memorable day. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together. So hopefully you'll have some time to join us for the Team Trifecta, 3 Keys to a Highly Successful Team. So that's the end of our webinar. Thanks for listening, and thanks for coming back after a little bit of technical difficulty on Thursday. And just have a great week. Thanks for listening.